Okay, this is grade 9, chapter 7.2, formative quiz on multiplication of polynomials by monomials. So the first question is a true-false. It says 2x plus 2x is equal to 2 times 2x. Well, this is a chapter 5 question, and this is a chapter 7.1 question, because a monomial times a monomial. If we solved it using gathering like terms, 2x plus 2x would be 4x. And if you wanted to draw it, you could have a 2x plus an additional 2x. Since they're like terms, you would say it's 4x. And if I was to multiply 2x by 2, I would also have the exact same drawing. I would also have, when I solve that, 4x. So when I think about this question, is 2x plus 2x equal to 2 times 2x? The answer, therefore, is true. They're the same value. They're both worth 4x. Question 2 says 2x plus 2x squared is equal to 4x cubed. And the answer is false. And again, this is actually a chapter 5 question. Because when you are adding two polynomials together, or two monomials together, in order to add them together, they need to be like terms. And since an x and an x squared are not like terms, you can't gather them beyond that. Some people think you add 2 plus 2, or 2 times 2 is 4, and x times x to the squared is x cubed. So if it was this question, then your answer of 4x cubed would be true. If you multiply them together, it's true, but when you add them, you can't add them past what they already are because they're not like terms. Question 3, distributive property question. 2 times 2x plus 1 is equal to 4x plus 1. The answer is false. If you hear that little echo in the background of the answers, I have a student that's very enthusiastic right now of answering. Yes. He's very cocky right now because he has the answer sheet in front of him. So using distributive property, the reason why this is a question is because sometimes when people do distributive property, all they do is they multiply the first term by 2, and they forget to do the rest. But with distributive property, you also have to multiply the second term by 2, which means the actual solution would be 4x plus 2, not plus 1. Question 4 is the product of 10x squared times 5x is equal to 15x cubed. The answer for this is false, because when you multiply 10x squared, you have 10 times x, that's 10x squared, multiplied by 5, multiplied by x. Sometimes what people do when they multiply the two coefficients together is they add them instead. But really you should multiply them. The correct solution shouldn't be 15x cubed, it should be 50x cubed. Your next questions are all part of the modeling. It says what multiplication equation can be made from this model. Since it's asking for a multiplication, you can think of it as a length multiplied by a width will always equal the area. And therefore, since the length here is negative x minus 2 and the width is a positive x, you could think of it as being a positive x multiplied by a negative x, negative x minus 2, or the binomial length, is equal to negative x squared minus 2x. So far, so good? Next question, what multiplication equation is this model? Again, we can go with length here. It doesn't matter if you call it length and width or width and length. The reason why I'm going to use that first is because it's a monomial. So I'd love to have my monomial multiplied by my binomial. Now, if you actually did it the other way and you had this multiplied by this, that is still okay. It just so happens that when we normally multiply two things together, and if one of them is a monomial, just treat it as your first term because it makes this go this way as opposed to this way. Either way, it's correct. And since it asks for an equation, it also wants to know the answer. And since negative x times negative x, if I wanted to think about what negative x was, it's really a negative 1x multiplied by a negative 1x. So therefore, the reason why I'm writing that way, even though we always say never write one coefficients, is when I multiply the coefficients together, negative 1 times negative 1, it's going to give me just a 1. and the x times the x is going to be x squared. So really, a negative x times a negative x is a positive 1x squared, or just 1x squared, x squared. A negative x multiplied by a positive 3 is like a negative 1 times a positive 3, which is a negative 3, and x is by itself, so the answer is negative 3x. And therefore, the solution would be x squared minus 3x. So I filled in the blanks here. I would also get that same answer. I get I have to say that I think it's a negative times a negative is a positive, and a negative times a positive is negative. I would get that in modeling as well. Question, whatever the next one is here. What multiplication equation is this model? Again, our monomial first, our binomial second, and some people write it like this, 3x2. Remember, this is a positive 2, right? So therefore, it actually connects the two terms together. So instead of being 3x2, it's 3x plus 2. And then when I expand it using distributive property numerically, or write it as negative 3x squared in here, when I multiply a negative x times a 3x, a negative 1 coefficient times 3 is a negative 3, and x times x is x squared. A negative 1 times a positive 2 is a negative 2, and x stays by itself. So in here we would have a negative 2x. What multiplication equation is this model? Negative 5 multiplied by negative 2x minus 2. And when I think about what this first one would be, negative 5 times negative 2 is positive 10. X remains by itself. And a negative 5 times a negative 2 is a positive 10, so the solution would be 10x plus 10. Solve using distributive property. So for this one on your test, if it says solving distributive property, I would like to see your arrows to show me that you understand that both terms of the polynomial in the brackets must be multiplied by the monomial outside the brackets. That reminds yourself to do it that way. X times 3x, you do not need to write it like this, but if you did, it would help you see that it's 3x squared better. You do not have to write this step here, but if you're a little weak, it might help you to do that. And x times 1 is simply 1x, or simply x. And again, going back to chapter 5, 3x squared plus x, you cannot add it any further because they are not like terms. Using distributive property, bring this down here. 4 times negative x. 4 times negative x. Since negative x is negative 1x, you might want to write it down. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. And x stays as is. Do your second arrow to show that 4 times 1, which is a positive 4. Don't forget to put your positive sign because it actually becomes the addition sign to join the two terms in your binomial together. Next question, solve using distributive property. Again, use your arrows. Negative 2 times 5x is negative 10x. And negative 2 times negative 1 is a positive 2. And finally, the last solved by distributive property. Is it the last one? One more? 2 more? 3 more? Oh, wow, there's a lot more. Solve using distributive property. Negative 2x times negative 2x is negative 2 times negative 2 times x, or negative 2 times negative 2 times x, or positive 4x squared. The second one, negative 2 times 1, is simply negative 2x. Anything times 1 is itself. So your solution is 4x squared minus 2x. Your next one's a slight variation from the other ones in that you have a monomial, in this case the monomial negative 10, multiplied by the trinomial in the brackets of this. So in this case, when you use distributive property, you have to multiply every term in the brackets by negative 10. So negative 10 times 3x squared will be negative 30x squared. Negative 10 times positive 2 will be negative 20x. And the most difficult part about this is the negative 10 times a negative 3, which is a positive 30, not a negative 30, because a negative times a negative is a positive. Your next one, 4x squared times 2 minus 3x. 4x squared times 2 is 8x squared. And 4x squared, which is 4 times x, 4x squared, multiplied by negative 3x is this. That will be a negative 12 for your coefficient, and x cubed for your exponential form of x squared times x. Now, if you were asked to express all answers in descending degree of terms, you would have to rearrange it like this, keeping in mind that that is a negative 12x cubed, not a 12x cubed. So if you rearrange them in descending degree, this would be the whole term, and this would be the second term. But you probably won't have to, so don't worry about it. And your last question, is it your last one? Okay. Here, this could have been written like this. So if I think about what is this negative sign meaning, we learned earlier in exponents, we thought of that as being the opposite of. So we could read that as being the opposite of negative 2x squared minus 2x plus 1, or just think about multiplying by negative 1. And when you multiply something by negative 1, you get its opposite anyway. So I'd end up with a positive 2x squared, or simply 2x squared. The positive symbol is not necessary. Plus 2x minus 1. What is the area of a rectangle with a length of 2x minus 1 and a width of 3x? Draw the rectangle, write a formula, and simplify. So we have a length of 2x minus 1 and a width of 3x. The area will equal length times width. Area will equal 3x multiplied by 2x minus 1. Simplify using distributive property. And the area equals 6x squared minus 3x. Is that it? One more? Is this the last question? What is the area of a triangle with a base of 2x plus 2 and a height of 4x? It says draw the triangle. So when given an option, always make it a right triangle. It's much easier. Base is 2x plus 2. The height will be 4x. The perpendicular distance from the top of the triangle to the base. Write a formula. So the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. Or base times height divided by 2. Now here we have distributive property again, but we're going to go backwards from the monomial. The monomial is our second term, but we still have to do it this way. So we're going to end up with 8x squared plus 8x over 2 when we multiply that out. And if we use distributive property a second time to divide the polynomial by 2, we would end up with 4x squared plus 4x. Therefore, the area equals 4x squared plus 4x. This is actually a 7-3 question right here. This becomes a 7-3 question. It's division of a polynomial by a monomial.